So then we can move to our closer look story for the day. The U.S. Department of Justice is it again, at it again, with a new team for Operation Dying Ember. Sounds spooky, right? This time it was to undertake a secret court order to remove malware from Ubiquiti devices infected by fancy beer. The devices in question had default administration passwords, as well as remote admin access on the public internet. The DOG reinfected the routers with the original malware used to compromise them in the first place, and then used that compromise to remove remote access and clear up the secondary payloads that had been installed to turn them into a potential botnet. The DOG said it would then notify users to do a factory reset and install the last firmware, as well as changing their admin passwords. So there's quite a lot to unpack here, Tom.
Yeah. So, okay, it goes without saying, friends. Change the default password of your device and disable remote administration capabilities before you connect it to the internet. Okay? That being said, what I found fascinating about this story is that the U.S. Department of Justice obtained a secret court order to go disable these things on behalf of people. So, just so we're clear, according to sources in the Department of Justice, the Fancy Bear Group is run by ex GRU hackers. Some of them are ex, some of them are current. And so what would happen is that they would hire out other people to drop Mubit on a router to get access to it. And then GRU folks would go behind them and use the Mubit payload to gain access to the router and turn it into a botnet. So what the DOJ did was, aha, cut by your own knife. We're going to use Mubit to take control of the router again. We're going to kick all of you out. We're going to reset all the passwords and disable login from the internet. And then we're going to email the users and go, hey, you need to fix your problem. In theory, as someone who would like the internet to be a better place, bravo to you. Love that idea. Let's clean this thing up. Now I'm going to take off that hat and I'm going to put on my black hat. Why in God's green earth is the government messing around in my router secretly? Like, I could see if they sent me an email saying, "Hey, you have a problem. Would you like us to fix it?" Then I have a choice. I can say, "Yes, I would like you to fix this problem. Please take care of it for me." Or, "Don't worry about it. I'll go change that password now." Because you can't just assume that people are dumb, okay? Maybe they were busy. Maybe they didn't understand, right? But for you to go in and muck around in my device secretly causes problems, man. Max, if you got an email from any government agency saying, "Hey, we just got into your router and reset all the passwords because you did a terrible job of picking passwords. You need to factory reset it and upgrade all your firmware," what would you do?
Well, I think I would go pretty crazy immediately, very simply because I think that so as you say, there are two sides to the story, right? And you can understand that the perceived, let's say, perceived threat or reality of the threat kind of overrides, in that case, the individual rights of the rights of the individual. Uh, Obviously, there are two sides to the story, and I think that you wouldn't want any agency, be it the DOG or even worse the IRS, to get into your stuff and start resetting passwords on your behalf and changing things, because it's clearly a breach of privacy and a breach of whatever is yours, right? I mean, if they're able to do that with the router, and if you can get to the router, then it means that you can get to pretty much anything else inside the house and start resetting passwords and do whatever you want, right? So I think that it's really kind of a controversial move in my view. Yeah, and it's one which I didn't follow, and I will need to check what the EFF, the Electronic Frontier Foundation, thinks about that approach. Now, that said, I think it was a pretty smart way of doing things and returning, we'll say the carpet or something like that. But yeah, it's I would feel pretty much uncomfortable, and I would try to seek answers about, why do you guys didn't try to plan it in a different way eventually.
So I'm gonna go take the black hat off and I'm gonna put the white hat back on for a minute because I agree with you that this is probably like I don't know if I feel 100% comfortable with that. That being said, it's not like they're breaking into your routers to figure out if you're paying your taxes or not. They're keeping a nation state actor out of your device. Because the other thing you got to remember is Fancy Bear doesn't do things like this because they're, like the kids in the seminal 1995 work Hackers. This isn't Zero Cool or Crash Override. They're doing things for very specific reasons. And given the fact that it is an election year in the US, there's a lot of things that they could do if they had control of a few thousand devices that can amplify a lot of attacks. I'm not ascribing any motives to these folks. I'm not saying they had anything nefarious in mind. I'm just saying that if you have tools that are pre-staged that can do all kinds of stuff, who knows what you can get away with. So I'm glad that the Department of Justice has decided that this is something that needs to be dealt with. Again, I take issue with their methodology. Now, if there is a way for us to go into the federal government, say the CISA, and just say, from here on out, if we think your device has been compromised by Fancy Bear and we can prove it with a warrant or in a court of law, then we will go in and we will disable their access, which is what they did. Like, the court said you could go do this, which means you had to meet an evidentiary standard proving that it was accessed by foreign actors for a purpose that was, illegal. And so, great. But you've got to keep people in the loop as you do it. And on the whole, if I got the email, I said, everything had to be erased and reset, great. Like, once I confirmed it was from the actual DOJ and not someone pretending to be the DOJ, yeah, I'd probably breathe a little bit of a sigh of relief. But at the end of the day, I still need that process to be transparent. And I think that's where the biggest problem that I have right now is with the process, is that it is not transparent.
Yeah, the other thing which is interesting here as well is, the responsibility of somehow, I don't know if it's really with the vendor or, but probably with the vendors which kind of keep those default passwords all over the place. I mean, there's probably some effort going on to deliver devices which are more secured out of the box, but I think it calls into probably avoiding that from happening again. And I mean, here we're talking about Ubiquiti routers, but let's think about all of the other IoT devices which are sold here and there and which can be also vectors for infection or misuse, right? So the question is, how do you kind of force the vendors to deliver solutions which are more secure out of the box? And perhaps also one of the things that we are alluding to is how can you, let's say, cut off these devices without, making an intrusion into them, right? So if there is a way you could, for example, if you're an ISP or something like that, you could detect, for example, that the password is by default, and you could disable it from the network or send a message, whatever. And of course, I'm oversimplifying things because that I'm not a network guy. But I mean, there were probably other options to do it in a more elegant way. But at least it has the merit to fix the issue and open the debate.
Yeah, and this is something that's going to be an ongoing debate because this is just the first wave of these kinds of things. And when you're dealing with it in cyberspace, it's not as cut and dried as, say, oh, I don't know, a criminal gang broke into my house and started, running a smuggling ring out of it. Well, yeah, I want the police to come in and kick them out of my house, right? So it's a little bit different when it's in cyberspace, but hopefully we can come to a reasonable agreement about this in the future.